Nobody spoke for a full minute. The rain hammered the roof of the SUV in steady sheets. Luca sat in the front passenger seat, jaw tight, watching Gabriel in the rearview mirror the way a man watches a lit fuse. The two bodyguards had climbed back in without a word, because Gabriel had used the quiet, flat voice that meant the conversation was over before it started. The girl sat across from Gabriel now, back straight, yellow raincoat dripping onto the leather seat. She held the phone in both hands, screen still glowing, and she looked at him the way teachers look at students who keep giving the wrong answer, patient, but only just. Gabriel looked at the phone properly for the first time. The woman in the photo had dark hair pulled back from her face. She was wearing scrubs, pale blue, and she was smiling the small, tired smile of someone who had just finished a very long shift. The word missing sat across her image like a wound. Something moved in Gabriel's chest. Something old. "Where did you get this photo?" he asked. "She's my mom," Zeal said. "Her name is Laura Bennett. She's a nurse at Mercy General." She paused, then added, as though it was the most important part, "She saved your life. 6 years ago. You probably don't remember her face because you were bleeding too much to keep your eyes open, but she remembers yours." The SUV felt smaller suddenly. Gabriel kept his expression still. It was a skill he had spent years building, the ability to hear something that hit him hard and show absolutely nothing. But his hand, resting on his knee, closed slowly into a fist. He did remember. Not her face. Not her name. He remembered a bare concrete room behind a dry cleaning shop on the east side. A single overhead light, and hands that moved fast and sure over a wound that should have killed him. He remembered a voice, low and steady, telling him to breathe slowly and count backwards from 20. He had made it to 14 before the world went dark. When he woke up, the room was empty and clean, and Luca told him the nurse had vanished before anyone could get her full name. They had never found her. Gabriel had told himself it didn't matter. The city owed him 100 debts. He had simply collected one early. "How do you know about that?" he asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Because she told me," Zeal said simply. "She told me everything. She said that one day, if something ever happened to her, I should find you." She reached into the front pocket of her raincoat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases from being opened and closed many times. She held it out to him. "She wrote down your routes, the roads your cars use, the times. She said you're a creature of habit, and that habits are just patterns, and patterns can be mapped." Gabriel took the paper. He unfolded it. His routes were on it. All of them, written in neat, careful handwriting, with small notes in the margins. Tuesday, always Delancey after midnight. Friday, the canal road, never the bridge. Weeks of careful watching, recorded in a nurse's precise hand. He folded the paper again. "She's been missing for 3 days, Zeal continued. Her voice stayed level, but her fingers tightened on the phone. "The police took a report, and then nothing happened. Nobody is looking. Nobody cares about a missing nurse from the east side." She looked at him steadily. "But you care. Because she is the reason you are sitting here right now, and not in the ground." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really an appeal. It was simply a fact, laid on the seat between them like a document waiting to be signed. Gabriel looked at this small girl, soaking wet alone, sitting in the back of a car that belonged to one of the most dangerous men in the city, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt cornered by the truth. He looked at Luca. Luca said nothing, which meant everything. "Tell me," Gabriel said quietly, "everything you know." Zeal reached into her raincoat again. This time she pulled out a small notebook, the kind sold in packs of 3 at corner stores, with a bright orange cover and an elastic band holding it shut. She snapped the band off with the practiced ease of someone who had opened it 100 times.
And held it out to Gabriel the way you hand something precious to someone you are not entirely sure deserves it. He took it carefully. The pages were dense.
Laura Bennett had small, tight handwriting, and she had used every inch of every line. There were dates running down the left margin, stretching back almost 2 years. Next to each date was a time, a set of initials, and a short list of medical notes. Gunshot wounds, stab injuries, broken bones set without hospital records, chemical burns. Every entry was clean and factual, with no names, no addresses, just initials and the kind of damage that never gets reported to anyone official. She kept records of everyone she treated off the books, Zeal said. She said a good nurse always keeps records, even when the patient doesn't want her to. Especially then. Gabriel turned a page. Then another. She wasn't just treating random people, Zeal continued. Look at the symbols in the margin. The little triangles. Gabriel looked. Beside certain entries, Laura had drawn a small, neat triangle in pencil, so light it was easy to miss. He counted 7 of them across the pages he could see. Those are the ones she was called to a specific location for, Zeal said. Not the clinic on Marsh Street, where she usually worked the off-books shifts. Somewhere else. She told me it was underground, like actually underground, below one of the old buildings near the port. She called it the White Room because everything inside was painted white, like someone was trying very hard to make it feel clean. Luca turned around from the front seat for the first time. His eyes moved from the notebook to the girl and back again. Your mother told you all of this? Gabriel asked. Not all at once, Zeal said. A little at a time, over about a year. I think she was scared and she needed to tell someone. And I was the only person she completely trusted. She said it without any sadness, just as a plain fact. I'm a good listener. Gabriel believed her. He turned to the last page with writing on it. The final entry was 3 days old, the night Laura disappeared. The notes were shorter than usual, written in a hurry. The letters slightly uneven. A set of initials he hadn't seen before in the log. And beside it, not a triangle, but a small circle with a line through it. What does this symbol mean? He asked, turning the page toward her. Zeal's expression shifted just slightly. It means she didn't think the patient was going to make it. She only used it twice before. She paused. She called me that night before her shift and told me she loved me and that my aunt's number was on the fridge. She never says things like that before a regular shift. The SUV moved through the rain-dark streets. Nobody had told the driver to go anywhere, but stopping felt wrong. So he had simply kept moving, looping slowly through the empty blocks near the port. Gabriel closed the notebook and held it in both hands, thinking. Whoever had taken Laura hadn't grabbed her randomly. They had watched her, learned her routes, and waited for the right moment, which was exactly the kind of planning that came from serious, organized people with a specific purpose. They didn't want her gone. They wanted her working, which meant, for now, she was still alive. That was the only good piece of information in the entire notebook. The port area, Gabriel said, mostly to himself. The old warehouse blocks. There are 4 buildings near the south dock that have basements deep enough, Zeal said immediately, as though she had already worked this out and was simply waiting for him to catch up. She tapped the notebook. I mapped them on the back cover. Gabriel flipped to the back cover. There, in careful pencil, was a small hand-drawn map of the port blocks, with 4 buildings circled and numbered in order of likelihood. He looked at her for a long moment. How old are you? He asked. 7, Zeal said, but I read at a 10th grade level. They stopped at a parking garage on Clement Street, for levels up, away from cameras and street noise. The driver killed the engine. Rain drummed against the concrete ceiling of the open floor, and the city hummed somewhere far below them. Indifferent and constant. Gabriel told Zeal to sleep. She looked like she wanted to argue. But her eyes were heavy and her head had been dropping slowly toward her shoulder for the last 10 minutes. He took off his jacket and held it out to her without a word. She looked at it, then at him, then wrapped it around herself and curled against the door with the orange notebook pressed to her chest like a shield. She was asleep in less than 3 minutes. Gabriel stepped out of the SUV. Luca followed, pulling the door shut quietly behind him. They walked to the low concrete wall at the edge of the parking level and stood looking out over the wet city, its lights smearing in the rain below like spilled paint. Luca spoke first. We don't know enough, he said. His voice was calm and even, the same tone he used for everything, whether he was ordering coffee or delivering bad news. We don't know who took her, how many people they have down there, what kind of weapons, what kind of setup. We have a child's hand-drawn map and a nurse's diary. He paused. That's not a plan. That's a feeling. I know, Gabriel said. The Moreno family operates 3 warehouses near the South Dock, Luca continued. If this white room is on their ground, walking in blind is not walking in at all. It's just dying in a different location. I know that too. Luca was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, just slightly, enough for Gabriel to notice. We have real work to finish. The Castellano meeting is in 4 days. The East Side distribution problem still isn't solved. If we pull men for this, if we spend the next 72 hours chasing a missing nurse, based on the word of a 7-year-old. He stopped. People will notice. People will ask questions about why Gabriel Romano reorganized his entire operation for a woman nobody in our world has ever heard of. Gabriel said nothing. I'm not saying she doesn't matter, Luca said carefully. I'm saying this isn't our kind of problem. Gabriel turned and looked at him. Luca met his eyes without flinching. Because Luca never flinched, it was one of the reasons Gabriel had kept him close for 9 years. But there was something careful in his expression. The look of a man who was asking a real question and genuinely wanted a real answer. You know the difference between a job and a debt? Gabriel asked. Luca waited. A job has a price, Gabriel said. Someone pays, you deliver, the ledger balances, and everyone walks away clean. It starts and ends with money. He looked back out at the city. A debt is different. A debt lives in your body. You carry it whether you want to or not. You can pretend it isn't there. You can build walls around it. You can stay busy enough that you almost forget it most days. He was quiet for a moment. But it doesn't go anywhere. It just waits. The rain shifted direction, blowing in off the edge of the building, cold and sharp. She stopped my blood from leaving my body, Gabriel said simply. She did it alone, in a back room. For a man she didn't know, who couldn't even tell her his real name. She asked for nothing. She disappeared before anyone could offer her anything. He turned back to Luca. That's not a job. That's not even kindness. That's something else entirely. And I have been carrying it for 6 years without knowing her name. Luca was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly, the way he did when he had finished weighing something and reached a conclusion. I'll need 4 men I trust completely, he said. And we go in with real information, not a pencil drawing. I want at least 24 hours to map the location properly. You have 12, Gabriel said. Luca almost smiled. Then I'd better start now. He pushed off the wall and walked back toward the car, already pulling out his phone. Gabriel stayed at the edge a moment longer, looking at the city he owned, thinking about the one thing in it he actually owed. Angela Costa was a small woman who moved like someone who had spent a lifetime making herself hard to notice. She was 60, maybe older, with silver hair pinned flat against her head and reading glasses that she wore pushed up on her forehead, even when she wasn't reading. She ran a legitimate medical supply company on the north side of the Port District, which meant she had delivery access to nearly every building within 4 blocks of the South Dock, and nobody looked twice at her trucks. She also, Gabriel knew, had loved his father like a brother. He called her at 4 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring and didn't ask why he was calling at that hour. Because Angela Costa had never once asked a question she already knew the answer to. I need access to the South Dock buildings, he said. Specifically whatever is below them. I can get a truck to the service entrance of the Harlow building by 6, she said. There's a maintenance corridor that connects the basements of buildings 2 and 3 on your girl's map. I helped stock that corridor 18 months ago. I didn't ask who was paying for the supplies. A pause. I should have asked. 6 o'clock, Gabriel said. Bring warm clothes, Angela said. It's cold down there. She hung up. Zeal had been awake for the last part of the conversation, sitting up straight in the back seat with Gabriel's jacket still around her shoulders, listening without pretending not to. When he put the phone away, she looked at him with an expression that was equal parts relief and focus. She knows the building, Zeal said. It wasn't a question. She knows the corridor between buildings 2 and 3, Gabriel said. You mapped building 2 as the second most likely location. Building 3 as the first. Zeal nodded slowly. The shift change at Mercy General happens at 6:15. Mom always said that's when security anywhere gets sloppy. Because everyone is either tired and leaving or still waking up and arriving. There's about 12 minutes where nobody is paying full attention to anything. Luca, from the front seat, wrote something in his phone without comment. They reached the South Dock at 5:40. Angela's truck was already there. A white refrigerated vehicle with a medical supply company logo on the side, parked naturally against the service entrance as though it belonged there, which in every official sense it did. Angela herself stood beside it in a gray coat, holding a clipboard, looking entirely like someone doing an early morning delivery and nothing else. She looked at Zeal when they approached and something moved briefly across her face, something soft. Before her expression returned to its usual careful calm, she handed Gabriel a folded paper floor plan without a word. The corridor entrance is behind the secondary generator, she said quietly. There's one camera covering the door, but it's been looping the same 4 minutes of footage since yesterday evening. Someone cut the feed and patched it badly. She glanced at Luca. Which tells you they're confident, not careful. Confident people make wider mistakes, Luca said. Exactly. Angela looked at Zeal. You must be Laura's daughter. You have her eyes. Zeal looked up at her. You know my mom. I knew her work, Angela said simply. And left it at that. They moved through the service entrance in 2 groups. Angela walking ahead with her clipboard as legitimate cover. Gabriel and Luca and 2 of Luca's men following through the maintenance corridor 30 seconds behind her. Zeal stayed close to Gabriel's side, which he had told her firmly was the only condition under which she was allowed past the truck. And she had agreed with a speed that told him she had already planned to stay close anyway. The corridor was exactly as cold as Angela had warned. Bare pipes ran along the ceiling, and the floor was rough concrete, dimly lit by yellow emergency lights spaced too far apart. Their footsteps were soft and careful. Nobody spoke. Zeal touched Gabriel's sleeve once. He looked down. She pointed left at a junction ahead, toward Building 3, then held up 3 fingers and mouthed the words third door. He nodded. She had been inside the notebook in her head this entire time, he realized. Every step they took, she had already walked in her mind. In the quiet hours when all she had was fear and a pencil and her mother's careful handwriting to guide her. He let her lead. The smell hit them before anything else. It was sharp and faintly sweet, the kind of clean that doesn't belong underground, the kind that makes the back of your throat feel strange after one breath. Gabriel stopped walking. Luca stopped half a step behind him. Even Zeal went still, her sneakers making no sound on the concrete. Nitrous oxide, Zeal said quietly. Mixed with something else. Maybe isoflurane. She said the words the way she said everything, plainly. As though she had simply looked up the answer in a drawer in her mind and read it aloud. Mom explained the different smells to me once. She said a nurse who can't identify a gas by scent is a nurse who is going to make a very bad mistake one day. Luca pulled Gabriel 2 steps back and dropped his voice to almost nothing. Surgical anesthetic gases. If the concentration is high enough in that room and anyone fires a weapon, the spark alone could... I know, Gabriel said. One of Luca's men, a broad, quiet person named Dars, pressed his back against the corridor wall. How high a concentration are we talking? Enough to smell it out here means enough to matter in there, Luca said flatly. Gabriel looked at the third door. It was metal, painted white, with a thin line of brighter light running along the bottom edge. Voices came through it, low and occasional. The way people talk when they are waiting for something and growing tired of waiting. He counted 2 distinct voices, possibly 3. No weapons then. Not inside that room. That changed things, but not entirely in their favor. It meant whoever was inside was also aware of the gas. Which meant they were either being careful on purpose, or they were planning to use the environment itself as a kind of trap, a room where no one could safely shoot. Where the advantage went to whoever controlled the exits. The ventilation, Zeal said. She was looking at the ceiling. Running along the left wall near the top, half hidden by a pipe casing, was a ventilation duct with a manual lever control, the old kind, the kind that got installed in port buildings 40 years ago and never replaced because they still technically worked. If you open that fully, she said, the gas clears in about 8 minutes. Maybe less with the corridor draft. We don't have 8 minutes, Gabriel said. You have the time it takes them to realize what you're doing, Zeal said. Which is different. Gabriel looked at the lever. It was 8 feet up the wall. Dars was already reading his expression and moved to the wall, lacing his hands together as a step. Gabriel put one foot in his hands, reached up, and gripped the lever. It was stiff with age. He worked it slowly at first, feeling the resistance, then pushed it fully open with steady pressure. A low mechanical groan moved through the ceiling above them, and then air began to shift, a noticeable change in the weight of the smell. The sweetness thinning slightly at the edges. They waited in silence. Gabriel counted in his head. He got to 90 before Luca tapped his arm and held up 2 fingers, then pointed down. 2 men, ground level, near the door, which meant anyone else in the room was further back. At 4 minutes the smell was lighter. At 6, it was close to bearable. At 7, Gabriel nodded to Luca. Luca and Dars took the door together, smooth and practiced. The way people move when they have done this kind of thing enough times that their bodies know what to do before their minds finish the instruction. The door swung inward hard. Gabriel was through it in the same motion. The room was white, exactly as Zeal had described. Bright overhead lights, a surgical table along the far wall, equipment along the sides, most of it covered in plastic sheeting. 2 men near the entrance, neither of them armed with anything they could use safely in that room. Both of them slow with surprise. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Gabriel straightened up, breathing the cleaner air carefully, and looked at the room properly for the first time. Laura Bennett was not here. But on the surgical table, held down by a single clip, was a page covered in the same small, tight handwriting he had seen in the orange notebook. She had been here, and she had left them directions. Gabriel crossed the white room in 4 steps and picked up the page. It was torn from a medical chart, the kind with pre-printed rows and columns along the top. Laura had written across both sides in the same careful hand as the orange notebook. But faster this time, the letters slightly more pressed, like someone writing against a clock. At the top, underlined twice, were 3 words, for the debt. He read through it once. Then again. It was directions, clearly, but they were written entirely in medical language. Dosage numbers that weren't dosages. Room numbers formatted like patient file codes. What looked like a medication schedule running down the left side was actually, he was fairly certain, a time sequence of some kind. The words were real medical words. He could tell that much, but they were being used to mean something else entirely. The way a completely different language had been built inside a language he didn't speak in the first place. He handed it to Luca. Luca read it, his expression doing the careful, still thing it did when he was working hard on a problem. After a full minute, he folded it and handed it back. "I can't read it," he said simply. "Not the real meaning." "Neither can I," Gabriel said. Zeal held out her hand. Gabriel hesitated for only a second, then gave her the page. She read it slowly, her lips moving slightly, her finger tracing certain lines without touching the paper. She got to the bottom, flipped it over, read the back the same way. Then she looked up. "I can read some of it," she said. "The medication schedule on the left is a time map. These numbers," she pointed to a column of figures, "are not doses. They're distances. Meters, I think, based on the units she used. She learned this from a book she used to read to me. It's a field medicine guide from the army." She thought the coding system in it was beautiful. Zeal paused. "But the middle section, these room codes, I don't know this system. It's different from anything in the notebook." Gabriel looked at the middle section. The room codes were formatted like standard hospital file references, letters and numbers in a specific order, but the combination didn't match any filing system he had ever seen referenced in the buildings his organization used for record keeping. "It's the Costa ledger system," Angela said. Everyone turned. Angela was standing in the doorway of the white room, clipboard still in hand, having followed them through the corridor in her quiet, unannounced way. She walked in and took the page from Gabriel without asking, studied the middle section for a moment, and nodded slowly. "Your father developed this coding system 20 years ago," she said to Gabriel. "He used it to record every agreement, every debt, every arrangement he made with the city's institutions. Hospitals, courts, port authorities. Everything. Laura was the keeper of the physical ledger because your father trusted her mother, who was a nurse at Mercy General before Laura was." She lowered the page. "Laura grew up knowing this code the way other children grow up knowing their mother's handwriting. It is completely natural to her and completely unreadable to anyone who wasn't taught it directly." Gabriel felt the ground shift slightly beneath his understanding of everything. "My father knew her family," he said. "It was not quite a question. Your father built half his arrangements through her family," Angela said. "Laura has never been a random nurse. She has always been the living key to the most important records your family owns." She set the page back on the surgical table, which is exactly why they took her. They don't just want her medical skills. They want her to read the ledger for them. The room was very quiet. Gabriel looked at the page, then at the room around him. The white walls, the plastic-covered equipment, the space where Laura had been held and had still somehow found a moment and a reason to leave them a map. She had known someone would come. She had written the directions in a code only she could fully translate, which meant she had written them not as a complete guide, but as a reason. A reason for Gabriel to find her before someone else forced her to talk. "How much time do we have?" Luca asked quietly. Angela folded her hands. "Not much," she said. "They will try tonight." The call came 11 minutes after they left the white room. Gabriel's personal phone, the one with the number that fewer than 8 people in the world possessed, buzzed once in his coat pocket. The screen showed no name, only a string of digits he didn't recognize. He answered it and said nothing, because the person who calls that number unannounced speaks first or not at all. "You move fast," the voice said. It was measured and unhurried, with the particular smoothness of someone who had rehearsed being calm for so long that it had become genuine. "I expected you by morning. It's barely past midnight. I'm almost impressed." "Almost," Gabriel said. A short pause, then a quiet sound that was not quite a laugh. "My name is Renner. I think you know my organization, if not my face. We've been circling each other's territory for about 2 years now without direct contact, which has suited us both." Another pause. "Until recently." Gabriel walked to the far end of the corridor, away from the others. Zeal watched him go with steady eyes. He turned his back and kept his voice flat. "Where is she?" "Safe," Renner said. "Comfortable, even. She's been cooperative in small ways, which I appreciate. She's a remarkable woman. Very composed." The smoothness in his voice carried something underneath it, not cruelty exactly, but the complete absence of any feeling about another person's situation.
The voice of someone who had long ago stopped finding human difficulty interesting. "I want to be straightforward with you."
"Because I think you're a person who values directness." "Get to it," Gabriel said. "The ledger," Renner said. "Your father's ledger. The full physical document. Not the fragments I've recovered, not the coded directions your nurse so cleverly left behind for you. The complete original." He let that sit for a moment. "I want it. I've wanted it for 2 years. Every arrangement your father made with this city's institutions is recorded in it. Which means whoever holds it holds the actual architecture of how this city functions beneath the surface." A brief pause. "Give me the ledger. And Laura Bennett walks out of here tonight. Free, unharmed, back to her daughter. You have my word. And if I don't, then I begin tonight's work," Renner said quietly. "And by morning she will have told me everything she knows, willingly or otherwise, and you will have lost both the ledger and the debt you've been carrying." A pause. "This is a clean offer, Gabriel. You give up a document for a life. Most people would call that a simple transaction." Gabriel said nothing for a moment. Outside, somewhere above the Port District, thunder moved slowly across the sky. The corridor was cold, and the yellow emergency lights made everything look the color of old photographs. He thought about the ledger. What it meant. Every agreement his father had built. Every arrangement that kept his organization woven into the city's fabric. Every thread of influence that had taken a generation to spin. Giving it to Renner wouldn't just weaken him. It would hand Renner the keys to every institution in the city and lock Gabriel permanently outside every door that mattered. It was, by any reasonable calculation, an impossible trade. "I hear you," Gabriel said. "Good," Renner said. I'm not finished," Gabriel said. His voice stayed even, but something in it changed. The way a room changes when a window closes and the outside noise stops completely. "You're offering me a transaction. A price for a life. You think that's the language I operate in, because that's the only language you know." He paused. "But I don't buy lives. I don't sell them either. And I don't negotiate for what already belongs to me." A silence. "The ledger is mine," Gabriel continued. "Laura Bennett is mine to protect. And you are currently holding both in a building I already know the floor plan of, with men who have been awake for 19 hours and a ventilation system that your engineers installed incorrectly." He let that land. "This wasn't a negotiation, Renner. You called to find out how close I was." Another silence, longer this time. "Now you know," Gabriel said, and ended the call. He walked back to where Luca was standing. Luca read his face in 1 second flat. "How long do we have?" Luca asked. "As long as it takes him to make 3 phone calls," Gabriel said. "So start walking." Zeal had been carrying her school bag the entire time. Gabriel had noticed it when she first climbed into the SUV. A small backpack with a broken zip on the front pocket, so ordinary against the yellow raincoat that he had filed it away without thinking. He thought about it now as they moved fast through the lower corridor, because she had unslung it from her shoulder and was pulling out a textbook while walking, which was either the strangest thing he had ever seen in a situation like this, or the most useful. "Resonance," she said, not slowing her pace. "Every structure has a natural frequency, a rate at which it vibrates most easily. If you match that frequency with an external source, the vibration amplifies." She had the book open to a page dense with diagrams, holding it up as she walked the way people hold maps. Old port buildings use the same electrical conduit system throughout the whole structure. One shared line running through the basement level. If the conduit vibrates at the right frequency, the current becomes unstable. Unstable enough to do what? Luca asked from behind her. Trip every breaker on the floor simultaneously, Zeal said. Complete darkness. Maybe 40 seconds before the emergency generators kick in. Maybe more if the generators are old. She looked up at Gabriel. The Harlow building's generators are old. Angela told me when we came in. She said they were installed the same year as the ventilation system. Gabriel looked at Luca. Luca made a face that meant he had no idea if this was going to work, and also that he had no better option. What do you need? Gabriel asked her. The main conduit access panel, Zeal said, and something that produces a strong, steady vibration at around 60 hertz. A motor, a drill. Anything with a consistent mechanical frequency. She paused. And about 90 seconds. Dars was already moving ahead of them down the corridor. He came back 40 seconds later. Access panel is around the next turn, left wall. There's a maintenance cart next to it. Angle grinder on the lower shelf. Zeal nodded, as though this was simply confirmation of something she had already expected. They reached the panel. It was a gray metal box set into the wall, the size of a large painting, with a handle latch that Dars opened in one motion. Inside, thick conduit pipes ran in parallel lines from floor to ceiling, the building's entire electrical system bundled together in one accessible location. The kind of design that made maintenance easy and made Zeal's theory possible. She studied it for 3 seconds, pointed to the second pipe from the left, and looked at Dars. Hold the grinder flat against that pipe. Don't cut. Just contact and run it. Steady pressure. Dars looked at Gabriel. Gabriel nodded. The grinder's motor started with a sharp whine that filled the corridor. Dars pressed it flat against the conduit pipe, and the sound changed, dropping into a hard, physical vibration that Gabriel felt in his back teeth. Zeal watched the panel, counting under her breath, her finger moving slightly as though she was tracking something invisible. The lights flickered, held, flickered again, harder this time. Then the entire floor went dark. Not dim. Completely, suddenly, absolutely dark, the kind of dark that makes your eyes feel like they've stopped working. Somewhere above them something electrical hummed and died, and the hum of the building's systems dropped away to nothing. Distant voices, sharp and confused. The sound of something being knocked over. Running footsteps on the floor above. Now Gabriel said. They moved through the dark by feel and memory, Gabriel's hand on the wall. Zeal directly behind him with 2 fingers hooked into the back of his belt without being told to, Luca and Dars behind her. Gabriel counted the doors by touch. The way Laura had counted meters in her coded message, turning distance into something you feel rather than see. The third door on the right. He pushed it open. The room beyond had one narrow window at ground level, rain-gray light coming through it, enough to see by after the total darkness of the corridor. Enough to see the figure sitting upright on a cot against the far wall, wrists bound, but eyes wide open and completely alert. Laura Bennett looked at the doorway. Then she looked past Gabriel and found her daughter's face in the dark. Mom, Zeal said, and for the first time since the rain-slicked alley, her voice was just a child's voice. Nobody spoke for a moment. Laura was on her feet before anyone moved toward her, crossing the small room in 2 steps. Dropping to her knees on the cold floor and pulling Zeal against her with both bound wrists, the rope making the embrace awkward and complete at the same time. Zeal buried her face in her mother's neck and held on with the focused, silent intensity of someone who had been holding themselves together for 3 days through sheer will and had now, finally, been given permission to stop. Luca cut the rope from Laura's wrists with a small blade. She didn't thank him. She just kept one hand on the back of Zeal's head and looked up at Gabriel over her daughter's shoulder. She looked exactly like the photo on the missing person's screen, tired in the same way. The same small, careful eyes that took in a room and cataloged it in one sweep. A nurse's habit, always assessing, always noting what might become important later. There was a cut above her left eyebrow, 3 days old and poorly cleaned, and her scrubs were the same pale blue as in the photo Zeal had carried through the rain. You came, Laura said. You knew I would, Gabriel said. I hoped, she said. There's a difference. She stood up slowly, keeping Zeal close against her side. The ledger is in the ceiling panel of this room. 3rd tile from the left wall. They never searched in here properly because they thought I was the key and didn't need to look for the lock. Gabriel looked at Luca. Luca pulled a chair to the corner, stepped up, and pressed the third ceiling tile. It shifted. He reached into the gap and pulled out a flat, cloth-wrapped package, about the size of a large book, bound with 2 elastic bands. He handed it down to Gabriel. Gabriel held it for a moment without unwrapping it. It was lighter than he expected, for something that had cost this much. They moved out through the dark corridor, up through the maintenance level, and out through the service entrance into the pre-dawn air. Angela's truck was still there. The rain had slowed to a fine mist that caught the dock lights and turned them soft. Somewhere on the upper floors of the building, voices were still searching through the dark, Renner's men working through the confusion of the power failure, looking in the wrong direction, which was the only gift the night had left to give. They drove in silence for a while. Laura sat with Zeal tucked under her arm, stroking her braids back from her face in a slow, absent rhythm. Zeal had her eyes open, watching the city pass through the rain-streaked window, finally still in the way that people are still when they no longer have to be strong. Gabriel sat across from them with the cloth-wrapped ledger on his knee. He thought about his father, who had built an empire out of control and fear and careful record-keeping, who had trusted a nurse's family with his most important secrets because somewhere underneath the machinery of power, he had understood that loyalty is kept by people, not documents. He thought about the 6 years he had spent believing he owed nothing to anyone, wearing that belief like armor, letting it excuse every cold decision, every turn back, every debt he had quietly refused to acknowledge. He looked at Zeal, asleep now against her mother's shoulder. Orange notebook still held loosely in one hand, even in sleep. A 7-year-old had mapped the city, read her mother's coded message, understood resonance theory well enough to bring down a building's power grid, and had done all of it without asking for anything except the one thing that actually mattered. Gabriel unwrapped the ledger slowly. It was old, bound in dark cloth, every page dense with his father's coded handwriting. Every debt the city owed, every arrangement, every agreement, every thread of obligation running through every institution from the port to the courthouse. He had spent 2 years thinking of it as a weapon. He looked at Laura. "When you're ready," he said quietly, "I want you to teach me to read it properly. Not to use it. To understand what my father actually built." Laura studied him for a moment. "That's a different kind of work than what you're used to." "I know," Gabriel said. "It'll take time." "I have time," he said. He looked at Zeal's sleeping face, the beaded braids, the orange notebook. "I finally have something worth spending it on." He closed the ledger and held it carefully in both hands. The way you hold something you have just decided to stop treating as a tool and start treating as a responsibility, and watched the city move past the window, gray and wet and full of people who deserved better from the men who ran it. For the first time in 11 years, Gabriel Romano was thinking about what he could build instead of what he could take. The rain kept falling, softer now. The way rain falls when the worst of the storm is past, and the city is simply being cleaned.